big mazel tov to everyone who finished Sefer Yehoshua together. And for those who are not quite up to the perek, that's okay. Good news. Today we started with Shoftim Perek Aleph. So this is the big chance. If you haven't looked at Sefer Shoftim in a while, some of you may have heard me say this, but you're going to be a little surprised because not that the book has changed, but we've probably changed a little bit. We're more mature maybe than the last time we've seen the Sefer Shoftim. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that we missed as kids or through some of the previous runs to Tanakh. And it's an amazing Sefer. It's intense. And you're definitely going to take another look. So if you haven't looked in a while, this is a good chance. If you haven't, and if you have, this is a good chance to take another look. But what we're going to focus on today is part of Sefer Yehoshua, which is something. Let's start with this. When I was in the tour guiding course, I remember I was meeting once with Rakaz, the organizer of the course. He said, "Listen, Gedalia, when you go for the exam, they have this big exam at the end of the tour guide course that's like they can ask you anything on any plant, animal, historic event, people, anything that you did or didn't learn throughout the course, geology, all kinds of stuff. Anyway, so if they ask you about where a place is mentioned in Tanakh, say the end of Sefer Yehoshua. Okay, you can't get it wrong. And basically, that's what you probably noticed if you're going through those last prakim, is that it's just there's a lot of geography there. Now, for most people, that means kind of skip or skim, right? Get through it as fast as you can. But for us, that of course is these are code words, right? And the more we understand about the geography, the more we can understand about what it's trying to tell us. I wish we had time now to go through all of these prakim. We don't. So I want to kind of bring you on a little bit of a journey through one perek in particular, which is like literally almost entirely geography. And I guess you could say except for one word. The word one, it appears a lot. Okay, this is perek Yud Bet. It's not all geography, but a lot of it. And it's a perek that I imagine a lot of Tanakh teachers dread trying to teach. It's a perek that's hard to read through. It's hard to understand what we're supposed to get from it. There are different understandings, like everything about what we're supposed to get from it. And I want to try to bring you on a journey through what happens when I look at a perek like this, what comes to mind for me. And what I'm sharing with you now is not a, it's half-baked, as they say. It's not fully cooked, it's not fully ready. Not because I didn't prepare for this. I've actually given this class in the past and it wasn't ready then either. It's because I just simply haven't finished looking into the topic. But it can help us understand a little bit. It can give you a view of how I look at these prakim, and I hope that it'll give you a chance to sharpen some of your own skills, because we each look at prakim in different ways, and so I have a lot to learn from you, and I have a couple of things to share as well. So I'm looking at perek Yud Bet and Sefer Yehoshua. If you have one in front of you, great. If not, okay. This is the perek where, among other things, from Pasuk Tet, we start going through these different kings that Yehoshua conquered. And it's basically written in a song format. So it could be that it's meant to be kind of a song. Maybe it's meant to be chanted, something like that. It's unclear. I heard one opinion where it was like Yehoshua saying Melech Yevicho, and everyone says Echad, Melech Ha'ai, Shemitzad Beta, and everyone says Echad, right? It's like a whole big communal activity. Either way, what's interesting here is that not all of these places are exactly, not all of these stories are mentioned, and there are places that are mentioned that aren't in this list. And the question is, how did we come to these 31 kings? But let's take a step back and let's look here at the psukim we have here on the screen. And the question, we're going to come back to the kings, but then the question I want to start with is, in essence, the question of Yehoshua conquering the entire land. You can see I wrote Kibush Haaretz, the conquering the land, with an exclamation point. In Yehoshua Yud Aleph. ויקח יהושע את כל הארץ הזאת, ההר, ואת כל הנגב, וכל ארץ הגושן, ואת השפלה, ואת הערבה, ואת הר ישראל, ושפלתו, י"ז, מן ההר החלק העולה שעיר ועד בעל גד בבקעת הלבנון, תחת הר חרמון, ואת כל מלכיהם לחד, ויקם וימיתם. Okay, very good. So Yehoshua conquered the entire land, right? If we put it in just in one phrase, Yehoshua conquered the entire land. Seems very clear. And then the next slide, Kibush Haaretz with the question mark. This is Yehoshua Yud Gimel, just a couple parakim later. Yehoshua zaken bab yamim. Vayomer Hashem ilav, ata zakanta. Bata b'yamim, you've already, you've aged. You've aged well, you're great, but you're getting older. Va'aretz nishara habem od lirishta. And there's still a lot of land to conquer. So this is a classic question people ask, right? Like, so which is it, right? Is it, did they conquer the whole land? Didn't they conquer the whole land? And there are a bunch of different answers to this. I wanna try to give two answers that I think are interesting. Again, there are a bunch of answers, but let's go back for a second to the first one, to the first slide here. So it says that Yehoshua conquered this entire land. But then it goes on to delineate. Why didn't it just say the entire land or the entire land that I promised you or all these things? But it doesn't do that. It actually goes to different areas of the land. But if you notice the areas that it goes through, it's interesting that it doesn't mention, maybe it leaves out certain areas like the coast, like the Amakim, the valleys. In fact, it talks mainly about highlands, which actually is exactly what we find throughout the other Sfarim. That was mainly what Yehoshua conquered, right? When we look through the parts of Yehoshua where we see that they didn't conquer, when we look at Sefer Shoftim and we see where they are and where we aren't, so we can kind of understand that the areas where we're having the most trouble is actually those lowlands, and maybe that's purposely left out here, meaning these are the areas that Yehoshua was able to conquer, and those are the highlands, perhaps. Another explanation that I actually really like, but I wasn't planning on going into, is it could be that Yehoshua conquered them, but they weren't settled. When they weren't settled, so then we end up losing it. Okay, so that's a little bit of a more classic one, by the way. We definitely see that a little bit in our own times as well. Again, I'm not going to go into the politics here, but we can certainly see that certain areas, let's put it this way, there are certainly times when we're more or less in control of certain areas. And again, that has a lot to do with our presence. If we were to, let's say, for example, leave, this is a pretty neutral example, I think. So if we were to leave the area bordering Gaza, let's say the people there got tired already of sitting there and having rockets poured down on them every once in a while. They're, having to run with their kids to the miklat, to the reinforced room, while the rest of the country is not exactly feeling their pain very often. And they say, okay, we've had enough, we're moving, right? So what would happen to that area around Gaza is we'd lose it. That's what would happen, the border would shift. So if we're not actually sitting there, if we're not actually settled there, then it's something we're gonna lose. Okay, so that's one of the more classic answers, or potential answers. I wanna give a whole different angle at looking at this. Again, it's something that, like I said, is only half-baked. It's not something that I have fully worked out still, but we'll see. And if you have suggestions, I'd love to hear them as well, by the way. This I'm going to skip for now. This is an interesting topic, but I guess for another time, maybe if there's time at the end. Okay. This is where I really want to put my focus. Now, for those who've done my who've taken part in my online course. So some of this is going to be a little bit of a review, but I think it's still helpful because it kind of gives you really the broad picture over here. It's a quick run through. But what we're going to do is we're going to run through the land of Israel. Again, in my online course, this is a whole 7 to 8 week program in the field. We kind of do it. We did it in 4 tours, although there's still a little more. There's still more ground to cover. Here we're going to do it in just like 5 to 7 minutes. So here we have Har Hermon, Mount Hermon, in the north. Okay, important to point out, look at my arrow, this is the direction of north. Okay, so basically this corner over here, this is north. Okay, here we have the Golan Heights. It's an area made out of, let's say it's coated in basalt, which is volcanic rock. This is the area that in the times of the Tanakh would be known not as the Golan, but as Bashan, okay, in the tribal area of Menashe. And there was a city in the Bashan called Golan, and that's why it gets its name today. Then we have the Gilad, okay, famous people from there, such as Eliyahu HaGiladi, okay, so he's coming from the area of Gilad, of course. The Yabok, which we actually, we're dealing with now, Yaakov Avinu, okay, when he's going to come back into the land, so he's going to come through Ma'avar Yabok. It's likely that Avram also crossed the Yabok when coming into the land and coming in towards the area of Shem, but we don't actually have that written explicitly in the pasuk. Then we have Ammon, Moab, and Edom is already off the map in this case. Okay, and those are the areas of Evar Yarden. Looking towards the, okay, that's the east of the Jordan. Looking at the west, well, actually, let's look at the Jordan itself for a second. Here we have what's called Emek HaChula, the Hula Valley. And you have these rivers, which is in essence the tributaries of the Jordan River. The main tributary, the main source of this is from the Hermon and the foot of the Hermon, the springs of the foot of the Hermon, and they lead into the Kinneret. From there, the Jordan River down to the Dead Sea, and it all, of course, ends at the Dead Sea. And after that, we still have what's known as the Syrian-African Rift. All of this is part of that Syrian-African Rift, the rift in tectonic plates of the Earth's surface. And beyond that, we have the Arava, which is again already off the map, but that's like a continuation of this rift, just dry. Okay, so it's the area without the water. And of course, that rift continues on into Syria and Africa, thus its name, right? We're just a small part of it, but that's important to keep in mind for the greater picture, but less for right now for our purposes. Here we have what's called Etzba Galil, the area of Harei Naphtali. And here, the border of Israel does something interesting. Borders, generally, not always, are today are actually kind of arbitrary. They're based more just on wherever troops were or whatever kind of ceasefire agreement people come to, but it's not based like it should be, perhaps, or like it used to be on geography, geology, and actual real natural factors. By the way, that also often leads to issues in politics and with social groups, not just in Israel. I'm not even talking about just Israel. All around the world, you have this issue. A lot of what's going on in the greater Middle East has to do with the fact that the greater powers around basically split up areas that used to be based on tribal lands. Now all of a sudden they're based on wherever different stronger powers had their influence, and that caused all kinds of issues. Either way, here it makes kind of an L. Okay, so we have Ramat Naftali, and then we have Reches Sulam Tzur, which is the area of Rosh Hanikra. This area over here, in theory, is part of the Upper Galilee, but it's actually part of Lebanon. So geographically, it's part of that. Upper Galilee, Lower Galilee. The Lower Galilee is already made up of mountain ridges and valleys. And the biggest valley, and this is where we really get into our area that we're looking at, is this over here, the Jezreel Valley, Emek Yisrael. Okay, you can see here Mount Tavor, you can see here Givat HaMoreh. Now, you have some major routes, international routes that are coming through the land of Israel. And one of the major ones that we talk about is what's known as the Via Maris, Derech Hayam, okay, the way of the sea, which comes basically is from Mesopotamia, coming down towards Egypt, and it has no choice basically but to pass through our land bridge, our land. Okay, and so it comes down, let's say through here, and cuts across the Jezreel Valley, and then we have a problem. Okay, here we have an obstacle course known as the region, the Carmel region. Okay, and the Carmel region is made up of 3 different parts, and all of them are not convenient for climbing up and going back down, assuming you really just want to travel by. Okay, so if you really just want to cut across, you don't want to be going up and down, just like you wouldn't want to do that with your car, you wouldn't want to do that with your donkey or by foot or by bike. So you'd rather find an easier way to cut around it. And in this case, it's through these valleys, okay, Vadi Milech and Vadi Ara. And there's actually another one here, the Dotan Pass. And these come towards the coastal plain, make their way down on towards Egypt. Okay, in addition, That basically, that's that main road. More locally, we have another road which has to do with the mountain area itself. This is most of the area where we're actually settled. Okay, like we said before, most of the lower lands and the shore, those are areas that we had more trouble capturing, whereas in the mountains, we had a much easier time. Okay, and so here, each of these riverbeds that we see here is a way to cut through the shvelat, the low foothills, and make our way to the foot of the mountains. And then we find spurs that come out from the mountain ridge, and we can climb them up into the mountains. In addition, here by Hebron, the road actually splits, and there's one going down towards Beersheba, one going down towards Arad. These are the roads, okay? And whoever controls these roads, they're going to be more powerful. They're going to have more influence, and they're also, of course, going to be able to tax whoever's coming through. So whether it's a time of war, whether it's a time of peace and trade, so then these are going to be important and strategic places. In addition, there are certain junctions in the road, which also become very strategically important. Okay, so these include, in essence, whenever you have, let's say, a north-south and an east-west route that are meeting, so those can be important junctions. Okay, like Soek, or especially by Ayalon, in the area of Gezer. Okay. In addition, wherever you have an obstacle that you're trying to avoid, and you have a path going through it, let's say like over here, okay, in the Carmel region, by, like we said, Wadi Milech and Wadi Ara, these passes coming through the area of the Carmel, those are going to be important places that you have to guard, because if you guard those, in essence, you control the whole area. Same by Chatzor, same by Tavor, for anyone who's looking into the story of Tvorah, which didn't come up in Sefer Shoftim, so keep that in mind. Okay, that answers a lot of questions over there. Kedesh Naphtali, and etc. Having run through the land now, what I'd like to do is to actually take another look at that perek. And again, we're not going to go through all of the different names. We're going to stick to some of the more common ones. And again, a couple of reasons for that. One is because there are a lot of them, but another reason is I'd rather stick to ones that we know most about, and also some of them we really don't know. Some of them I haven't myself, I haven't researched enough, and some of them are just really question marks that we don't know as well. Okay, but either way, when we start looking at these, then we have Yericho, right? Yericho, we can already understand from the beginning of Sefer Yehoshua, is a very important junction. This is a way to come into the land. It's a way not only to come into the land, but in essence, we have here a connection between the what's known as Derech HaMelech, the path, the international route that goes along the mountains of Jordan, and in essence, it cuts east to west, coming into the mountains of Israel, and can cross to the other side to the Via Maris. Okay, so this is a very important road. Now, people who really are not interested in coming into the mountain area and would rather go around it, chances are this is not the way they're going to want to go, because you still have to climb the mountain and go down the other side. That being said, it is an important route, and it is used, and we see this throughout Tanakh. This road is used. We see in Shoftim, we see in Shmuel, comes up in Melachim as well, Yericho. Okay, so this is clearly an important area strategically, and as such, it makes sense that perhaps that's maybe that's one of the reasons why it's being mentioned here. Beit El as well. Beit El is interesting because in the area of Har Ephraim, you don't have a lot of opportunities to really spread out to the east and to the west. Beit El actually is a place where you can move to the east and the west. You can have routes there. Okay, most of the other areas, even though there are riverbeds, they're much too sharp and deep to really be useful for passes. Yerushalayim also has passes. Hebron, we already mentioned, has that split over there. Basically, Hebron is a high area in the mountains of Hebron, and when you're trying to get up from the Negev into the mountains, it's going to be a place where you're going to come across and you're going to have to deal with it. Coming from the north as well, by the way, you also have it as an important place, as a high place, and it also has passes to the west as well. So that certainly takes a place as a strategic point. Lachish has the basically it holds. Let's take another look at the map. It holds the southwest corner over here. Okay, this is the area of Lachish, It kind of looks out over the southwest area. That's why this is the second most important place in Yehuda in the times of the Melucha, in the times of the kingship. Of course, second after Yerushalayim. Fascinating place, by the way. A place where the archaeology and the Tanakh really meet one-to-one. It's a fascinating place to go visit. Very cool. And so its importance, it seems, comes from controlling this corner over here. And we see Lachish mentioned in a number of places throughout. Okay, now a number of the other places that we're going to see are places that are here in the Shfela, and it's kind of a line. Now, these places also, some of them are actually reinforced later on in the times of the Melucha, because they, in essence, they help to block and to protect this area within. On the other hand, these places are sometimes destroyed in this order, and attacked. By the way, Yehoshua does this as well. When Yehoshua comes into the land, so they come in by Yericho. In essence, they cut across the area of the mountains. Okay, part of the reason for that might be to try to split the different nations that you have here, divide and conquer kind of thing. It could also be for another reason, but they end up chasing these southern kings down and around to the Shfela, and then cutting and coming up to Hebron. And so part of the reason could be that they're trying to make sure that no one comes and helps them. Okay, and we see a similar thing perhaps also in Sefer Melachim. And if that's the case, so then these kingdoms, these little kingdoms that you have here, could also be, in essence, trying to hint towards that same idea. So you have a number of them. Here, Dvir is a little more complicated. Arad, we mentioned. Okay, so coming in from the Negev, that becomes a very important point. Afek. Afek is this area over here. This is a cool one. Okay, it's mentioned also a number of times in Tanakh. Here, we have a number of obstacles when we're trying to make our way on this international route, the Derech Hayam, the Via Maris. And as such, we're not going to go directly on the shore. We're more likely to go farther inland, around the area of Route 6 of today. And when we do, we're still going to have some of these riverbeds that are gonna crop up and annoy us. They're going to get in our way. Here you have an opportunity to circumvent the obstacle of the Yarkon River. And the Yarkon River starts by a place called Afek. I guess you can call it Rosh Ayin because it's the head of the spring. And it happens to be that it's also Rosh Ayin, that area. Okay, that's where Rosh Ayin, of course, gets its name. It's basically the spring head that the Yarkon flows from. And if you go there today, you can actually see that on both sides, meaning both by the head of the spring and right on the foot of the Shomron mountains, you have remains of Ottoman fortresses. And you actually have fortresses here throughout different time periods. And the reason for that is because this is a very strategic point. Here, in essence, you have a narrow pass, and this is the way that people are going to want to come through. I hope you can see it here. If I can zoom in. Let's see. I can. Okay, so here you have one side. You're not going to want to go further to the west because you have the river there, among other obstacles. And on the other side, you already have the foot of the Shomron Hills. You're not going to want to start climbing hills just to go around, right? You're going to want to pass through here. And that means if you put someone on either side and you block it off, you can charge taxes, you can control the area. This becomes a very important point, Ma'aba Afek. Here we have the beginnings of the battle. It's also a staging ground for the armies that are going to get ready to go fight, because you'd rather do it here before passing through areas that are more complicated strategically. You'd rather make sure that you're already everyone together and ready to go to war. And as such, here you have the staging ground and the beginning of the battle that happens at the beginning of Sefer Shmuel when they go up and they take the Aron HaBrit. Here you have the staging ground at the end of Sefer Shmuel Aleph, right before Shaul's last battle on the Gilboa. So the Plishtim gather over here, they send David back down, and then they end up making their way up to the Jezreel Valley, to Emek Israel. Okay, so that becomes an important place strategically as well. I want to mention just a couple other things. Chatzor we mentioned, okay, a very important point over here, because again, even once you make it through the Carmel passes and you make it through the Jezreel Valley, you still have to somehow make it up this way to the north and then on towards Mesopotamia. And as such, Chatzor has a very important point over there. There's also another place, Kedesh, which is also very important, but I'm not sure if it's this. Okay, now Kedesh, there's Kedesh Naphtali, but there were apparently other places with the same name. That's not an uncommon thing. You have a number of different places called Afek. There, especially, I mean, think about it. When Afek means like Afik means like a spring, so it makes sense that there are going to be a number of places that are called spring because you have a number of springs around, right? So when we don't know the sources of all the different names, okay, I don't think Gezer is because of carrot, for example, because we didn't have that here then, but at least not that I know of. But that being said, place names, there are often more than one place. Okay, so for example, Beit Lechem. Beit Lechem is a place that's apparently good for growing wheat, right? So you have Beit Lechem Yehuda, you have Beit Lechem Agalil, and maybe there were others as well. It's a common thing. So there was more than one Kedesh, and based on the geography of the list, I'm not sure if it's in the same place. Okay, because we have to see if the list actually goes based on the geography, which it usually these things do. That being said, we have here Ta'anach, Megiddo, Yoknaam, Dor. All of these are in the area of the Carmel. Okay, so here we have Dor is in this area over here. So if they did try to circumvent coming around this way, which normally people don't usually do because it's not convenient, but in theory is possible. So you have Dor over here. It's also an important port city. And then you have Yoknaam over here. Some of you have actually been with me to Yoknaam. Cool place. Megiddo over here by the Wadi Ara Pass. Tel Ta'anach is also in this area, okay, guarding the Dotan Pass entrance, meaning in essence, a lot of these places are these strategic points that the important routes pass through. Again, I haven't checked all of them. There's one that really challenges me that I've been trying to think. There are a couple of things that challenge me in this. One of them is I don't understand why Beit Shan isn't mentioned, because that would be an important one. But was it not conquered then? Was it, it's a question exactly what was going on with Beit Shan over there. Okay, Yoknaam seems to be a very important place. Why is that the only place that is mentioned throughout Tanakh? Why doesn't it remain an important junction throughout? Okay, that's it. And we see throughout history, there were other times when Yoknaam certainly took place. I mean, look, even if nothing else, just look at the archaeology, it's a huge tell with lots of different layers. That means that it was an important point throughout history. And the question is, why here all of a sudden is it not mentioned throughout the Tanakh? To me, that's a question. Either way, perhaps. Another way of looking at this story is that what Yehoshua did is he conquered those main places that are in essence the keys to holding the land. And if you can hold these keys, then it's much easier to be able to conquer and to control the rest of the land. At that point, though, it's still up to the rest of the nation to continue the work, to continue to conquer the actual middle grounds between these keys, to settle them, to build, to do agriculture, to control. And if that's not done, well, then we lose that opportunity. And not only that, we end up losing some of these keys as well. So perhaps it was meant to be an ongoing project where this was one of the stages. He, in essence, gave them the whole land. If they have it, all they have to do is get to work. And some of them complained. For example, the Ephraim, right? And they say, hey, this is a lot of hard work. And Yehoshua says, you're right. So get to it, right? Who said it was going to be easy? But I laid it all out for you. All you got to do is go and take it. And the question is, who actually goes and takes it, and who doesn't put in that effort? And of course, the more we put into things, the more we get out of it. And so I hope you'll also join me in studying Sefer Shoftim. The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. At least take a few minutes a day, read a perek a day. It'll change your day, could change your life. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed. It's a work in progress. Let me know also what you think. I'm sure you also have interesting ideas how we think we can understand these different questions that we raised here. Wishing you a beautiful evening.
Thank you, Gedalia.